Now, I told you last night that the budget would be more fantasy than reality, that it would be more about politics than economics. And ain't that the truth? It was astonishing to see Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese demonstrate such scant regard for the truth, such complete disregard for the future of the nation, and such a selfish obsession with their perceived political benefit. Let me give you some specific examples. First up, the tax cuts. Labor claims them as the centrepiece of their budget. But they're not about helping Australians, they're about conning them. They're not about attacking debt and deficit, but about trying to distract attention from debt and deficit. A $5 a week tax cut to come your way in more than a year from now is worth less than a cup of coffee, and it pales into insignificance compared to the electricity bill increases and tax increases Labor has already delivered. It's not relief, it's not reform, it's using our taxes to try and fool us. You can tell that from the way the Prime Minister sells the tax cuts like steak knives.
Heads up, Australia. We're giving every taxpayer another tax cut. Last year, we made sure that every Australian got a tax cut. And in tonight's budget, we've done it again.
Yeah, cheap politics. But wait, there's more. This is all about conning the media too, getting them to focus on tax cuts instead of the real story of this budget, and that is debt. Debt is about to hit $1 trillion, $1,000 billion. Jim Chalmers is Australia's first trillion-dollar treasurer, and he doesn't want to talk about it. In fact, he denies it. Listen to this.
Next financial year, the gross debt is more than $1 trillion. That's about a third of GDP. How's that going to be paid down?
Well, first of all, the debt this year, gross debt this year, is $177 billion lower than when we came to office because of our efforts. And that's saving Australians tens of billions of dollars in debt interest.
Astonishingly, Labor keeps getting away with this sort of stuff, and the journalists don't pull them up. No follow-up question there from the ABC to that nonsense from the Treasurer. Debt is not lower after 3 years of Labor. As we showed you last night, debt even now is more than $60 billion higher than when Labor came to office. And the budget tells us that within months it will be $1,000 billion, $1 trillion. And within a few years, Labor will have debt at $1.2 trillion. That's if our trillion-dollar treasurer has his way. So how can Chalmers claim debt is down? Well, I guess he's referring to forecasts, that debt is lower than it was forecast to be back in the pandemic recovery days. I guess that's what he'd say, but incredibly, nobody's asked him. He shouldn't be allowed to get away with claiming that debt is down when it is up to record levels. The facts need to get a run, and the ABC and others ought to have some respect for the truth. The big story of the budget is debt. The big worry for this country is debt. And the big lie we are being told, as you've just seen, is about debt. Now, let me give you another example of the spin coming your way. Listen to Chalmers on tax cuts.
The average annual tax cut after this year's and next year's is $2,548, or about $50 a week.
Well, not so. He's including in this number tax cuts legislated by the Coalition and then adjusted by Labor. And he's excluding the annual $1,500 tax offset payment that Labor scrapped. So he counts what the Coalition organised and he doesn't count what Labor scrapped. More political and economic trickery. No vision, no reform, no transparency. And let me give you one more example that gets to the essential national self-harm that we're getting from Labor, the way its ideological commitment to United Nations climate goals is destroying our cheap energy advantage. Labor has promised tens of billions of dollars in grants and subsidies to crank up what it calls a green hydrogen revolution. Yeah, they've seriously called it that. But as we've seen, project after project has fallen over. Have a look at them. At Gladstone in Queensland, a $12 billion plan scrapped, and projects in New South Wales and Victoria too, and a $600 million project at Whyalla in South Australia. Then there's more in South Australia, including a $750 million project at Port Pirie and a scheme in Western Australia, scrapped, despite billions of dollars of government subsidies, and two more in the West, of course, including a $1 billion project and one at Bells Bay in Tasmania too. And no doubt more will fall over in coming months. Yeah, that's the reality of green hydrogen. It's a disaster. But in the budget last night, Chalmers spoke as if the fantasy was still alive.
We're investing more than $3 billion to support the production of Australian-made green metals like aluminium and iron, building on the tax incentives for critical minerals and green hydrogen that we legislated last year.
How can you be that divorced from reality, especially when you're supposed to be in charge of the nation's finances? How can he seriously talk about green hydrogen funding when at least 10 major projects have been dropped by major companies, even though billions of dollars of government subsidies are on the table? Still, I guess when you try to pretend that a debt growing to $1 trillion has actually gone down, then you can say anything you like, unconstrained by reality. The big question now is what the coalition does in response. It's already opposed Labor's laughable tax cuts, which will be passed through Parliament anyway, I suppose. Peter Dutton, though, has an opportunity to attack this non-stop fantasy and cheap politicking in his budget reply tomorrow night. He can confront us with reality and some reform of substance. It won't be easy, but surely taxpayers deserve the truth and voters deserve a real alternative. Otherwise, we're fiddling while Rome burns.